Hello, everyone. Today we will discuss one of the most influential approaches in economics and regional development, Keynesian theories. These theories fundamentally changed the way economists and governments understand economic crises, unemployment, regional inequalities, and the role of the state in development. To understand Keynesian theories properly, we first need to look at the historical context in which they emerged. Before the 1930s, economic thinking was dominated by what we call neoclassical economics. Neoclassical economists believed that markets naturally regulate themselves. According to this view, if unemployment increased, for example, wages would eventually fall, businesses would hire again, and the economy would return to equilibrium automatically. The state therefore should interfere only minimally or should not at all. However, this belief collapsed during the Great Depression between 1929 and 1933. The Great Depression was one of the most severe economic crises in modern history. Industrial production declined dramatically, unemployment reached extreme levels, banks collapsed, and international trade shrank. Millions of people lost their jobs and savings. The crisis lasted for years, and traditional economic theories failed to explain why markets were not recovering naturally. At this moment, the British economist John Maynard Keynes introduced a revolutionary perspective. In his famous work, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, Keynes argued that economies can remain trapped in long-term recession if there is insufficient demand. In other words, businesses will not produce goods if people cannot afford to buy them because as production decreases, unemployment rises, which further reduces purchasing power and demand. The economy then enters a vicious circle. Keynes therefore believed that governments must actively intervene in the economy during crises. He argued that the state should increase public spending, reduce taxes, and lower interest rates to stimulate demand, because lower interest rates encourage businesses to invest and households to borrow and spend. Public investments, for example, in roads, schools, hospitals, or housing, create jobs and generate income, which then circulates throughout the economy. One of Keynes' most important contributions was the concept of the multiplier effect. The multiplier effect means that one investment creates a chain reaction of further economic activity. For example, if the government builds a highway, construction workers receive wages. These workers then spend their income in shops, restaurants, and services. Business owners earn more money and hire additional workers. Therefore, the original investment creates a multiplied economic impact. So, this idea became highly influential in regional development policy. Governments started investing in underdeveloped regions to stimulate local economies and reduce inequalities. However, Keynesianism also received criticism over time. Many governments adopted only part of Keynes's recommendations. Keynes believed that governments should spend more during recessions but save money during periods of economic growth. In practice, many countries increased spending continuously, even during economic booms, leading to large public debts. This selective application of Keynesian ideas is often called vulgar Keynesianism or bastard Keynesianism. Countries such as Greece experienced severe debt crises partly because governments relied excessively on borrowing without maintaining long-term fiscal balance. Despite this criticism, Keynesian policies dominated economic management during the 1950s and 1960s. This period was characterized by strong growth, low unemployment, and rising living standards across much of Europe and North America. In regional development, Keynesian ideas became extremely important because they believed that regional inequalities were not natural and unavoidable, but problems could be addressed through targeted policies and investments. In short, Keynesian theory transformed economic thinking by emphasizing the importance of demand and active government intervention. It created the foundation for many modern regional development policies aimed at reducing unemployment, stimulating investment, and addressing regional inequalities. Now that we understand the general Keynesian approach, we can move to one of the important theories influenced by Keynesian thinking is the sector growth theory. This theory explains how economies develop structurally over time. According to this perspective, economic growth is connected with gradual transformation between different sectors of the economy. Traditionally, economists divide the economy into three major sectors. The primary sector includes agriculture, forestry, fishing, and mining. These activities involve direct use of natural resources. In early stages of development, most people work exactly in this sector. As economies industrialize, labor gradually shifts into the secondary sector, which includes manufacturing and industry, factories, steel production, engineering, and industrial processing become dominant drivers of economic growth. Later, highly developed economies experience rapid growth of the third one and known as tertiary sector. It includes services such as banking, education, healthcare, tourism, transport, and retail. In recent decades, economists have also identified a quaternary sector based on knowledge, research, technology, innovation, and information services. This sector includes universities, research centers, software development, biotechnology, and advanced technological industries. So, the theory assumes that economic growth involves both quantitative and qualitative transformation. It is not only about producing more goods, but also about producing more sophisticated and knowledge intensive products and services. One important aspect of this theory is a labor mobility. Workers gradually move from less productive sectors to more productive ones. For example, industrialization requires workers to leave agriculture and move into factories. Later, automation reduces industrial employment and workers move into services and technology-based sectors. This process also changes the spatial organization of regions. Industrial regions emerge around factories and transport infrastructure, while advanced service economies concentrate in cities with universities and innovation ecosystems. Thus, sector growth theory explains economic development as a long-term structural transformation from agriculture toward industry, services, and knowledge-based activities. Understanding this transition helps governments design policies that support modernization and competitiveness. We will now move to export-based theory, which became particularly influential in regional economics during the 1950s. The main representative of this theory was Douglas North. He argued that the key factor determining regional growth is not internal consumption but exports outside the region. According to export-based theory, regional economies consist of two sectors, the export sector and the local sector. The export sector produces goods and services sold outside the region. These activities bring external income into the regional economy. Examples include manufacturing exports, tourism, mining, or agricultural exports. The local sector provides services mainly for local residents, shops, schools, healthcare, restaurants, and local transport. The theory argues that the export sector acts as the engine of regional development. When exports increase, money flows into the region. Employees and companies receiving this income spend it locally, stimulating growth in local services and businesses. This again creates a multiplier effect. Therefore, export industries indirectly support many non-export activities. North believed that successful regions are those capable of identifying products or services with strong external demand. However, dependence on exports also creates risks. Regions become vulnerable to changes in global markets, exchange rates, tariffs, and international competition. Export-based theory emphasizes that regional growth is strongly connected with external demand. Export industries generate income that stimulates broader regional development, although excessive dependence on exports may create economic vulnerability. For example, Ghana relies heavily on exports of cocoa, gold, and oil. These exports generate important revenues but also expose the economy to fluctuations in global commodity prices. Let us now turn to one of the most influential regional theories of the 20th century, growth poles theory. This theory was developed by the French economist Francois Poul. He observed that economic growth never occurs evenly across space. Instead, development concentrates around certain industries, companies, or urban centers that act as growth poles. According to Poul, some industries are propulsive, meaning they have strong capacity to stimulate growth in other sectors through supplier relationships, innovation, and investment. For example, the automotive industry requires steel, electronics, logistics, engineering services, and research activities. Therefore, one strong industry creates demand for many related sectors. Regions where these propulsive industries are concentrated become dominant growth centers. Other regions become dependent or peripheral. The theory identifies several forms of polarization: technological polarization, income polarization, psychological polarization, geographical polarization. Governments attempted to apply this theory by intentionally creating industrial growth poles in underdeveloped regions. Growth poles theory explains how economic activity concentrates spatially around strong industries and urban centers. For example, in Slovakia, the automotive industry transformed regions around Bratislava, Kosice, Nitra, and Žilina into strong growth poles, attracting foreign investment and skilled labor. While growth poles can stimulate development, they may also deepen regional inequalities if benefits do not spread effectively. John Friedman further developed ideas about uneven development through the famous core periphery model. He was the founding professor of the program for urban planning in the Graduate School of Architecture and Planning at the University of California, Los Angeles, and served as its head for a total of 14 years between 1969 and 1996. Some of his concepts were implemented in practice of urban development. On the picture behind me is Partizanske city in Slovakia. This is an example of a typical planned European industrial town founded together with a shoemaking factory in which practically all adult inhabitants of the city were employed. According to Friedman, regions developed through unequal relationships between powerful cores and weaker peripheries. Because, on his opinion, core regions concentrate capital, innovation, political power, universities, skilled labor, infrastructure, while peripheral regions often lose resources through migration, capital outflows, and dependence on the core. Later, Friedman identified several cumulative mechanisms reinforcing this dominance, such as information concentration, innovation advantages, psychological attractiveness, stronger institutional systems. Importantly, Friedman emphasized social and political dimensions, not only economic variables. He developed the core periphery four-stage model of regional development, explaining that where economic growth is sustained over long time periods, its incidence works towards a progressive integration of the space economy. Ganu Mardal introduced one of the most influential theories explaining why inequalities often deepen over time and known as theory of circular cumulative causation. He rejected the idea that markets naturally reduce disparities. Instead, he argued that success generates further success, while decline creates additional decline. For example, successful regions attract investment, skilled workers, and innovation. Poorer regions lose human capital and financial resources. This process creates cumulative growth spirals. Marval distinguished between negative backwash effects, which weaken poorer regions, positive spread effects, where growth benefits eventually diffuse outward. However, he believed negative effects usually dominate unless governments intervene strongly, so circular cumulative causation explains how regional inequalities reinforce themselves over time. Without intervention, prosperous regions tend to become stronger while weaker regions continue declining. The last out of main concepts, but not the least, is theory of unbalanced growth. Albert Hirschman proposed a very different perspective. He argued that development should not attempt to grow all sectors equally. Instead, governments should strategically invest in selected industries or regions capable of generating broader growth. According to Hirschman, underdevelopment is often caused not by lack of resources, but by inability to mobilize them effectively. He emphasized development impulses and demonstration effects. Successful investments inspire confidence and encourage additional investments. Unbalanced growth theory argues that strategic concentration of resources can trigger broader economic transformation and mobilize hidden development potential. In conclusion, there are some several additional Keynesian-inspired theories emerged over time. The Big Push theory, for example, argued that small investments are insufficient for development. Underdeveloped regions require large-scale coordinated investments to overcome structural barriers. In general, these additional theories expanded Keynesian thinking by emphasizing strategic investment, industrialization, and structural transformation as drivers of regional development. In overall, Keynesian theories fundamentally changed the understanding of economic and regional development since times of the Great Depression. Their central message can be summarized as bringing work to people instead of moving people to work. This means government should actively support development in weaker regions rather than leaving regional inequalities entirely to market forces. Hence, Keynesian theories justified public investment, regional planning, infrastructure development, industrial policy, welfare systems, support for employment. At the same time, critics warn that excessive state intervention may lead to inefficiency, public debt, and dependence on government support. Nevertheless, during modern economic crises, including the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, many governments returned to Keynesian approaches by increasing public spending. Ultimately, Keynesian theories remain highly influential because they address one of the central challenges of modern societies: how to achieve economic growth while also reducing social and regional inequalities. Thank you for your attention.